Good afternoon, members, and welcome to the February meeting of the Education and Learning Committee. This is the penultimate meeting of this committee in the current session of Council. This meeting is being live streamed, will be made available on the Council's website for public viewing. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when you're not addressing the committee. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including any votes will be undertaken by a roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join, and this will allow us to monitor members' presence. Can I ask Clerk Tracy to confirm Sedrant and I approve remote participation? Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. We've got 21 members present. We've got 4 members present in Council HQ, and that's been the Chair, Councillor McKee, Councillor Stitt and Councillor Thompson, and we've got 17 members present on Teams. I've got 2 apologies from Councillor McGregor and Church Rep Sam Scobie. Not present at the start of the meeting are Councillor Crothers, Councillor Fairbairn and Kenny Pullen. Thank you, Chair.
Tracy, can I say, sorry, Chair, Councillor Karen Crothers puts an apologies in. It's Ronnie Tate here.
Thanks, Ronnie. Do you have that, Tracy? Yeah. So, do we have any declarations of interest? Oh, Kenny Pullen's just put in the chat that he's arrived after IT issues. Okay, so any declarations of interest? No, so we can move into the agenda proper. The minutes of the meeting of 9th of December 2021. Can we approve that as being a correct record? Thank you. Just an update on the Youth Council representatives. Following the decision of full council on the 16th of December last year, it was agreed that the Youth Council were invited to nominate 2 reps on the Education and Learning Committee. They were further advised that these positions are non-voting and substitution is permitted should one or both be unable to attend. The Youth Council, through the support officers, were asked to arrange for the nominations to be made and provide the details for each to ensure that they got the papers for the meeting and emails for the MS team invites. Youth Council discussed this and they are agreeing that the representatives at the same time as they carry out the vote for the new chair, vice chair. This is all taking place at the start of February. It is therefore anticipated the Youth Council representatives will take up places on the E&L committee for the March meeting. And Claire Rogers and Mark Malloy will keep us advised of any changes or any progress. Okay, so if we move to item 4 on page 19, this is investment in schools, virtual desktop technology. We have an update report, and this is an update for members on continued progress with virtual desktop infrastructure, including Windows 10 rollout across primaries and bandwidth upgrades programme. Also, the background on mobile learning network. Graham McAlorum is available to take any bandwidth and technical questions. And Anne Harkness to answer any questions regarding the rollout programme and user experience. But Gillian informs me that Anne's not present.
No, I am. I'm here.
Okay, so I'll throw it open. Is there anything you want to add to the report? No.
If I could, Chair,
yeah,
just to provide an update on the progress of the bandwidth upgrades. Sanker Primary was completed yesterday, and Shuken Primary is due to be completed this afternoon, with St Joseph's St Ninians, the final work being carried out later on in the week with full connection at the beginning of next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. That's good timing just in terms of an update. Okay, members, can I throw it open? Councillor McKee.
Are these things being completed because there's a meeting today, do you think? It's a bit kind of coincidental, isn't it? been dragging their heels for a while, haven't they?
If I could, Chair, the answer is yes. It is coincidence. We have had a move to progress these since the Christmas holidays. So this is the outcome of that extra push, and we're seeing a return to almost normal working without the reduction in contractor staff due to the pandemic. So things are starting to pick up a pace again.
Thanks, Graham. I've got Jim Dempster. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. In Graham's defence, it was coincidental. I've been chasing BT. The work in Sanker down the 17th of January, and our IT staff were initially in the school last week. I'm pleased to see that, and I just hope that we'll get some reassurance from Graham Moran that all of the schools in the region are now up to a standard where kids can actually access the broadband with their IT equipment and engage in learning. That was the whole object of the exercise. Well, on a different note, 2.3 in the recommendations is quite right, but I take it 3.6 on page 18 was a cut and paste, because it talks about somebody bringing information to the committee on the 18th of March 2021, which is a bit kind of late. There is a question in it though, Chair, and that is that the report being brought to the Education and Learning Committee 24th of March with detailed numbers of devices in each school. I trust that will be each devices supplied by the Education Authority, because some schools may well have additional equipment that's been supplemented by local communities and grants and investment. And I wouldn't like to think that the Education Department would use that as a means of reducing investment in some of the schools. I'm looking for parity. I'm sure that'll be the case, but maybe just some clarification, Chairman, that the list, because I know from experience that we are told when the grant and the gifts are made, that this equipment that's given to the school will not be maintained by the school, nor will it be replaced by the school. Therefore, it's only fair and reasonable that the devices counted as being in each school are the devices supplied by Dumfries and Galloway Council Education Learning Department. Thanks, Chair.
Is that one for you, Anne?
Can I take that? Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Dempster, thanks for that question. You're absolutely right. We will not be counting any devices that have been donated or provided through Parent Council funding. Once we have our mobile learning network up and running, these devices will be able to be used in schools, but they are not currently maintained by the Education Department. The technical side. So you're absolutely correct. These will not be counted in the numbers that we have.
Okay.
Thanks very much, and thanks for that, Chair. And with your indulgence, are we comfortable now that every school in the region will be up to standard in terms of connectivity and broadband speed, etc.?
Graham, do you want to take that?
I'll take that, certainly. Thanks, Chair. The answer to that is yes. Each school, if my memory is correct, will have a minimum of 100 megabytes as far as primary school goes, and it should be 500 gig or 1,000 as far as secondary schools go. So that if we look at Education Scotland's recommendations, is probably slightly more than those recommendations. So yes, I'm quite confident that the bandwidth should be appropriate.
Brilliant, Chair. Thanks to Graham, Anne and Sandra. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So I've got John Young, Kenny Pullen and Jim McCone. So, John?
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I note on page 18, 3.11, there's a paragraph relating to problems caused by numerous pupils logging on at the same time. And I wonder if I could have a wee explanation of how this process happens and is managed. Are pupils at 9 o'clock in the morning, you'll have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of pupils wanting to log on. Do they log on directly to the cloud, or does it go through some sort of central network base? Could I have a wee explanation of how the numerous pupils logging on at the same time is managed? Thank you.
Anne?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I can start to answer that question, and then I'll come across to you, Graham, because it is network related. You're right, everybody does log on at the same time, especially 9 o'clock, and this is why we've been having significant issues with our stability of our network. There is work ongoing, which is documented in the paper, and we are further down that road and getting that work commenced. Graham, do you want to add a little bit more to the answer?
Yeah, I think it was always going to be sort of the next step down the road as far as connectivity and efficiency for schools went. We're implementing a product called SD-WAN, which segregates out some of the non-essential traffic, focusing on allowing the logins and so on to take priority and be directed directly to where they need to go. So that's work that, in fact, we're just waiting for the devices coming. They've been ordered. So once they're in, there will be hopefully a decent improvement in the login times and both the effectiveness of the network as well.
So if I could just finish that, Councillor Young. So once this is in place, it would mean that no matter what time we have pupils and staff logging on, that network traffic would be routed directly from school out to the cloud, and therefore bypassing, which is currently a bottleneck, back to our data centre.
Thanks. That's very helpful. Have we a timescale for this improvement? And are schools being frustrated with waiting times at the moment, or is it something they can manage?
It has been very frustrating, Councillor Young, very frustrating. And the sort of increased capacity that we have in our bandwidth has sort of added to that problem. But this is a piece of work that we're expecting to get done extremely quickly. As Graham has mentioned, the kit is on order. It should be getting delivered very quickly, and that will alleviate all of the issues that we've been having with our network and the stability of it.
Okay, John?
Thank you.
Okay. So I've got Kenny Pullen followed by Jim McCall. Kenny?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of members have actually asked roughly what I was going to be asking as well, but just that in paragraph 3.2 about the mobile learning network and the really slow logons, do we have a timescale for that? I know you're saying quite soon. Is even just a rough timescale for that to be implemented?
Graham, do you want to answer that?
Perhaps I can deal with that, Chair. So the order is complete. We're just waiting for a delivery date, but we would anticipate that would be 3 to 4 weeks, and then it's a case of rolling these devices out. We could potentially be looking at rolling some of these out during the Easter holidays when there's less disruption to schools. That would probably be the most appropriate time.
And thank you for that. And so these gigabit connections that we have, they're not going to be routed through this single point of failure and causing congestion. They're going to be going straight out into the wider internet, and we're going to hopefully see some big improvements. Is that what we're hopeful of? That's
certainly the wish. Again, it may take some of the larger connections may take a bit of time to configure correctly, because some of it will be dependent on localized traffic and so on. But once the devices are in, then it should be relatively straightforward to do that.
That's excellent news. Hopefully that was really well. Obviously exams are coming up as well, so I'm just thinking about that for ICT access and issues and logging on and exam logons and everything like that. So if that was going to happen, some of that's going to happen during the Easter holidays. We're more confident about exams and using ICT during exams as well then.
Okay. We'll work with Anne's team to arrange a deployment timescale for those on a timetable.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So, Jim McComb. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Are you satisfied that the move to the mobile learning network poses no security issues for pupils using the network?
Graham, do you want to take that question? It's network related.
Very briefly, it's not my field of expertise, but I'll certainly try and answer the question. The school's mobile learning network will be filtered access to the internet. So as far as content goes, there should be enough protection there to, there should be enough functionality there to provide adequate protection to the internet. Security-wise, absolutely. The issue around the security, however, is caveated by the opportunity for pupils to use their own devices. And some of that security will be dependent on how those devices are configured. And obviously, we don't have any control over that. In saying that, the security on those devices is what they're using day in and day out. So if their parents or themselves are satisfied that the protection is there, then we won't be altering that.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay, Jim.
So there may potentially be issues where pupils use their own home devices.
Yes, but by creating this mobile learning network, Councillor McComb, we will then have capacity to accommodate pupils bringing their own devices in, as well as all of our iPads that are used widely across our primary schools having access directly to the internet, which they don't at the moment. They don't get access to the network. So, as Graham has spoken about, it's all to do with classroom management. So, regardless of whether they're using an education device or whether they're bringing in their own device, it would be down to the management used in that classroom as to how they were used, when they were used.
So are you saying on that whilst it states direct access to the network,
yes,
it is actually filtered access?
It is filtered, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak. So if we move to the recommendations, can we note 2.1? I see it says no further progress to date on bandwidth updates, but we've obviously received a verbal update that one of them was put in place yesterday, another one today, and the other one by the end of this week. Is it possible to actually note that as a verbal update? Yeah, just to make note of progress with regards to that. So can we note 2.2, progress to date with Windows 10 rollout and virtual desktop in paragraphs 3.7 to 3.12. And note 2.3, a report will be received by Education and Learning Committee on 24th of March with detailed numbers of devices in each school. Okay, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 5, Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 framework. This report presents members with an update on the progress in relation to Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 and provides members with reassurance that the appropriate due diligence is in place to support the selection of Hub Southwest as a delivery route for Dumfries High School. It also highlights an indicative timeline for the key stages of the settlement of Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2. And I see we've got Lauren Foss on the line to answer questions. Lauren, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Yeah, nothing to add to the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Lauren. Members? I've got Tracy Little. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Lauren. First of all, really liking the backdrop, the Dumfries city status. Yeah. What I wanted to ask was, it's to do with the Dumfries High School new build. What's the situation with the David Keswick Centre? And also think we have 3G pitches at the back of the high school, am I right? What's the situation when, if the school's been built in situ, I'm assuming that it's going to have a slightly different location if the school's going to be staying where it is for some time and then kids will be decanted. So is the David Keswick Centre part of this new build, or will it be left in situ? And whatever's happening, are we consulting with them continually?
Absolutely. The engagement has started with Greyston Rovers, Greyston Foundation, around the use of the David Keswick Centre. As we know, that's used outside of school core hours through a service level agreement. The end users that Greyston engage with and deliver services for use directly with as well, as and when that comes up. For example, the 8-lane running track is something that's come into focus just now from some of the end users. You're absolutely spot on in terms of how do we deliver that. It's going to be a tandem build where we maintain the existing facility. So both the David Keswick Centre and the school has to be maintained as an operational facility during the construction phase. The new build will replace all of that in totality. We now that we've had the go-ahead to engage with Hub Southwest around the design phase for this, we've actually started engagement with a handful of 5 architectural firms to look at which one are going to be the best partnership for us to engage with around the site development. As that progresses, we'll have options appraisals created that determine the best location within the site itself. So whether that effectively behind the school or in front of the school, we haven't taken those decisions yet, but inside that thinking absolutely will be the protection of the right level of external facilities, whether it's curricular delivery for the PE department, whether that's after school use, whether it's car parking, whether it's access routes and through around the things that need to be considered. Too early at this stage to clarify exactly what it looks like, but in a not too distant future, we'll get to that point.
Okay, Tracy?
Yeah, no, that's great, thanks. No, it's just, I'm echoing. It's just to make sure that especially Greyston Rovers and the service users, you know, the different athletes, are aware of what's going on and don't feel insecure. But no, you gave me a good guarantee with that. Thanks very much, Lauren.
Okay, so I've got Julie Irvin, Elaine Murray and Stephen Thompson. So Julie?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick question about 3.4 Lordburn Primary School. Obviously, it's been quite contentious and there's been some newspaper articles about it. I'm just wondering if there is a time scale that can be shared to reassure staff, parents and pupils of the school.
So the Academy progress and the Lordburn programme collectively together, they're something that our attention is turning to now. We would anticipate bringing a paper back to the March detail within it. As I say, we're following, I guess, a process that's controlled by the availability of funding. In the capital investment strategy, funding is released in next financial year to allow us to start that process. So hopefully in the March committee we'll have an indicative timeline that shows the development of those 2 sites within it. You're absolutely right though to highlight the issues and the challenges that we've seen at Lordburn Primary School, and none of that is underestimated. We do have clerks of works on a regular basis reviewing the school and looking at the site safety and the welfare of the pupils and staff within the facility. And that's something that we have to ensure that we continue to do right through to the occupation of the new facility within Minerva.
Okay, Julie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Elaine Murray.
Thank you. Mrs. Irvin's just spoken about the problems at Lordburn Primary School. The original Dumfries Time 2 included the Academy and Lordburn Primary, also Noble Hill Primary and Laurie now, and I wonder if it's possible to get timelines on all of those so that parents know what is likely to be happening with all those schools, and in particular on the issue of Lower Burn. You know, there had some very adverse publicity, really absolutely the wrong time for the school when it was trying to recruit primary one children. But I can understand that was born out of parents' frustrations about the length of time it is taking for the relocation of Lower Burn Primary School. And I'm wondering, part of the problem for Lower Burn is that it has to wait until kids from Dumfries Academy who are decanted into Minerva while the refurb is going on at the academy. And then that has to happen before Minerva can be refurbished to accommodate Lower Burn Primary. And I just wondered, how much have we looked at other alternatives for the decant of the Dumfries Academy schools? I mean, I know in the past, Langlands and Elmbank have been mooted as possible venues for relocation of academy pupils. I just wondered, is there any alternative which would enable the Minerva to be refurbished for Lower Burn more rapidly than the current plans, when it is at the end of the line, after the whole of the process for Dumfries Academy has been gone through? Thanks.
I think some very good questions, and I think just to start at the beginning, what we would look to do is to bring an update through the asset class paper around Noble Hill and Laurie now, because effectively now they don't sit as Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 projects because they are delivered through a different funding mechanism. So we can do those. I would say Laurie now is about to be handed back over, so it's at the practical completion stage with the nursery works completed. We're looking at a February in service date to transition the nursery back into the building, and the rest of the facility has been handed over and has been used as we speak. Noble Hill works are going through the design stage just now. We've actually got a site meeting fairly soon with the school staff to look around all the practicalities of that, and that has investment starting next financial year. The options that we need to consider for Lower Burn moving into Minerva are complex. It's a 7 classroom school. And looking at the assets that we currently have across Dumfries, none of them are big enough and appropriate to decant the full school in its entirety. Langlands has around 3-4 rooms, lots of little small associated spaces, so that makes it fairly challenging to move it into that location. Also, the cost associated with bringing it up to the right standard and specifications to make it fit for purpose is really difficult. I think one thing that we do have to do absolutely is looking at the full picture for the academy site. How does that investment take place? Now, from a financial perspective, it does make sense that the facility is refurbished using the Minerva as almost as a decant space because it exists. A decant cost associated with the academy site through the quantity surveyors that we had worked up was anywhere between £6 and £8 million. So to be able to deliver an academy decant facility would remove that level of funding from the overall project. Now, it might be that as we go through the design stage of this, that we can take smaller chunks of the academy at a time, so that we could potentially have the ground floor of Minerva refurbished and the primary school will move in there. What I would say, though, is that the funding allocation is based across the next 4.5 financial years. So whilst it sounds as if Lower Burn is last, the investment inside Minerva for Lower Burn will be taking place across those financial years. It just won't be ready for them to move into. So the M&E, for example, has to move through the whole building in one. The boiler system, the heating, the pipework, the electrical runs, all of these elements have to go through as one single project. I think very, very conscious of the pressures and the parental sense and feeling around the sensitivities of Lower Burn being viewed as last in the running order. And I think that's something that we need to work closely with them around about what is the best way through this. And it might be that there's a hybrid model that we can come up with through it. I think what we need to get into is the design detail of what do we actually need to do, and how does those chunks add up into its whole entirety. Again, it's a bit of a holding statement, unfortunately, until we get into the devil of the detail inside that one. But I'm very conscious that the sooner we can get them in there, the more impact and improvement that has on the experiences for the staff and the youngsters.
Okay.
Thanks. I think my point really more was about how to manage the decant of the academy parts, whether something different we can do with that, which would enable the refurbishment for Lowerburn to be brought forward. And I think obviously you're giving consideration to that. But I think Lowerburn parents would probably feel, at least to an extent, reassured if they know that we're looking at all options to try and bring that forward as fast as we possibly can.
Okay, so I've got Stephen Thompson. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. It's just following on from Councillor Little's point about the athletics facilities. I know it's maybe peripheral to the main consideration in terms of the high school new build, but I've been contacted by people in my ward, which is out with the Dumfries, because of the regional 8-track floodlit athletics facility and disability sports that takes place there. So looking at the time project management chart, it looks to be that demolition and landscaping wouldn't start until January 2026, 4 years from now. And presumably, if I could maybe just get a yes/no, basically, but the facilities as they are now will be basically intact until then, at which point feedback and consultation might inform what new facilities are in the new construction, because presumably something will have to happen to that land once the new project is delivered. Could I maybe get just that confirmation, just as a yes/no, so I can go back to the group and feed that back, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the physical buildings will remain until that point in time. The only difference might be the facilities, depending on where the schools are. That would be the only variance.
Thank you.
So I've got no further indications of anybody looking to speak. So can you move to the recommendations? Members are asked to note the information contained with the report. The indicative programme timeline for the replacement of Dumfries High School is set out in the appendix. Happy to note. Okay. So turning to item 6 on page 29. Item 6 on page 27. Rural School Provision, Carsfairn Primary School. This report provides members an updated position on Carsfairn Primary School, which operated as part of a partnership with Kells Primary School and Dalry Primary School until August 2019, when it became mothballed due to there being no pupils attending the school. Education and Learning Committee agreed on 17th March 2020 to commence a formal consultation with the local community on closing the school on a permanent basis. Since the agreement to proceed with the statutory consultation process, the impact of COVID-19 has significantly limited our ability to consult on the proposal fully and effectively due to the requirements to avoid contacts with our schools and communities. Officers now seek to provide the local affected community with a degree of certainty on the timescales for commencement of the consultation, with a further revised timeline proposed commencing after this academic session. And we have John Thin online, I think. John, is there anything you want to add to your report?
Very briefly, Chair, just to thank you for the introduction and just to explain to members, this is simply a paper that's an updated paper requesting permission to move the statutory consultation process to after this academic session due to the uncertainty that the continued restrictions of COVID's causing, and it allows an element of stability and information sharing that we can then ensure that the local community are aware of changes to the timeline which we would take after this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Members, any questions? Not seeing... Oh, sorry, Pauline Drysdale. Councillor Drysdale.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, John, for the report. Seems really clear to me, and thank you for extending the timelines last year and also this year. Could you just clarify with myself and the rest of the members how you will communicate? Is it just, are you going to do that through the Community Council, or are you going to have some sort of online consultation? That would be brilliant just to clarify that for me. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. It'll be simply an email to the Community Council Chair just to inform them that if assuming the committee make this decision, I'll let them know of the decision and that matters will progress after the summer holidays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak. So if we can move to the recommendations, can we 2.1 note the impact of COVID-19 on the statutory consultation process, and 2.2 agrees the revised statutory consultation timeline in the appendix. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 7, Wallace Hall Academy admission arrangements, statutory consultation update. That's on page 33. On November 2019, this committee agreed to progress the statutory consultation on the change of catchment boundary for Wallace Hall Academy. Similar to the report regarding Carsfern Primary, this report seeks members' approval to provide the local affected community with a degree of certainty on the timescales for the commencement of the consultation, with a further revised timeline proposed commencing after this academic session. And we have John to speak to this. John, is there anything you want to add?
Very much the same as the last paper, Chair. It's just simply asking members to allow us to move this consultation period to after the summer break again, just due to the uncertainty due to COVID. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Members? Councillor Scobie?
If I could beg your indulgence, I maybe should have asked a question under item 6, is maybe what happens when you turn up late. But it's just a question under item 6, again, that has to do with consultation. Are you allowing my question?
What's the question?
The question really was just, and for your, if you could advise, was just around the rural school provision, Carsfern. I just wondered if the email that we all received this week had any bearing on, I know where we are with Carsfern Primary School, but on small rural schools around composite classes, teachers, etc. It's maybe...
Gillian?
Thank you. I'm not familiar with the email that you referred to. However, no, this is a statutory consultation process regarding closure as opposed to the staffing arrangements and allocations. So, as I say, I'm not aware of the specific email. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so if we can move to the recommendations, as before, can we note 2.1 and 2.2, the revised statutory consultation timeline? Thank you. So agenda item 8 on page 37, the development of Dumfries and Galloway Council Children and Young People's Music Strategy, costings in relation to additional instrumental provision. On 12th of November 2019, Education and Learning Committee agreed to progress the This report provides elected members with information around staffing levels, pupil uptake, waiting list numbers and costings for additional staff, and seeks the views on how elected members wish to proceed with regards to the possible further evolution and development of the instrumental music service. And we have Jim Brown to speak to this. Jim, is there anything you want to add to the paper?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll throw it open to members. Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I think I've referred to music tuition in these chambers in the past, in the recent past, and I refer back to when indeed Gail McGregor was in the chair, and we had an opportunity to bring in the big noise Systema, and we were next in line for that, and it was working out what the costings would be. If we take the example of Perth, and a really deprived area, Perth, the Raploch, and how in past years they would be going around with machine guns. The people were actually walking about with violin cases, and it was such a great success. It wasn't just about the teaching them or the music tuition, it was also all the ancillary, the social skills, you know, coping and everything else. So anything we can do by way of music has great benefit to kids in terms of the broad curriculum and what they pick up through reading and music and all sorts of things. So if we can do this, it would be tremendous.
Jim, would you like to comment on that? I know the cost, as far as I can remember, this, as you say, is many years ago, and I think we were talking several tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds.
I'm not sure, Chair, if it was as much, but it was a lot of money. And the second phase went to the First Minister's seat in Govanhill in Glasgow. They took advantage of us. You know, we were next in line with the work that we did at that time. I don't know if we'd ever get the opportunity again from Systema and the big noise, but you know, we looked at our strategy then, and music plays a huge part. This is restrictive in terms of music tuition, but it's music in general.
Given this paper is to do with the costings really in terms of expanding the service, I think that's something which we can consider, but possibly not at this stage in the proceedings. Okay. So I've got Jackie McCammon.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Jim, for the report. I think, well, this has been a talking point for quite some time from constituents of mine. So I think we'll all agree when I say this council has a moral obligation to provide a good start for our children. And music tuition has been overwhelmingly proven to be an important part of a child's development. So, in my view, Dumfries and Galloway Council, we need to ensure that they deliver free music tuition where requested, and at the same time continue to lobby the Scottish Government and shine a light on the ever more frequent situation that the SNP Government once again make bold statements and failing to deliver. I would hope that all councillors will back for the authority to back. All councillors will back calls for the authority to back free music tuition and call on the Scottish Government to come up with cash as promised. So I guess that we need to ask ourselves, as referred to in point 3.8, when the Scottish Government committed to remove music tuition fees in their 100-day pledge, do we think that they've delivered that? And if not, as a council, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, as you see in the report, the Scottish Government has set aside £12 million for the delivery of their promise in the next financial year. But as yet, there's been no indication on the way in which local authority is going to be allocated this money. I, several weeks ago, contacted Stephen McCabe, who's the leader of Inverclyde Council, and he's also the COSLA spokesperson on children, young people and lifelong learning, to find out whether they had any indications of how this money was going to be given to local authorities. In his reply, he said that they were asking the same question and hadn't had a response. And as I say, I haven't had an update since then, so I don't know what the allocation formula is going to be. And speaking to Jim the other day, I don't think we've got any further information on that. I see the director shaking her head, so we're still waiting further information in terms of that. I've got...
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back and... Are we going to press for an answer there, or are we just going to sit back and wait? It's obviously really important, so...
Yeah, well, can you have the debate and then we can come back to the outcome in due course. I've got Councillor Surtees, Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think
we can't emphasise enough the importance of music for children's education, and I think everybody in this chamber understands and knows that it isn't just about talented musicians or people that are interested in music. It's for all children to experience as much as they can for their holistic education, and I think this is a really huge and important issue. And I would like to suggest that we, following the debate today, that as well as noting what Jim has provided for us for this meeting, that we ask for a further paper to come to the committee in March. I don't think we can wait, and I think we do need to make a budget decision as well regarding how we move this forward, and the clarity that we need is perhaps not. We don't have all the information that we need today, so that would be my suggestion, that we further this debate and bring a paper to the March meeting.
Thanks, Ross. Elaine Murray.
Yeah, I think it's really to come back on the point made by Jackie McCammon that there was an allocation, there was an indication of £12 million. And I've seen also the figure of 20 million, but I think that may have included monies for last year. I'm not sure, but quite what the explanation is for that. But if it's 12 million, we set our budget in about 3 weeks' time, and so did most other councils around about that time. In the next 3 or 4 weeks, and it's really not good enough that we don't actually have these allocations yet. Now, I know that's not in any way the fault of the council officials from Dumfries and Galloway Council, but we really do need to know how much money is coming our way, and if there was a desire to make an allocation over and above that, and that would be making an allocation to fulfil a pledge made by the Scottish Government and the council not having to pay for it. And I think that's an issue which we might want to ponder on. But if we did decide we wanted to make a further allocation, we need to know how much money we're getting, and it's not possible to do that while we've still got this up in the air. It's not the only thing that's up in the air about our budget at the moment, and I really feel that some of these things, given that there is not the uncertainty that there was over the Scottish Government's budget that was last year or the year before, I find it fairly unsatisfactory that it's taking so long for councils to be informed of their allocations for some of these pots of money.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if the £12 million, if we got our 3% allocation as we normally do, that's £360,000. We got 133,000 back last year, so that would leave £226,000, which is more or less exactly the same as it would cost for the 5 additional tutors if we got our full allocation. And I do agree it's not satisfactory. We don't have that information at this stage of the budget setting proposals. Rob Davidson.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll leave my camera off to try and maintain stable connection. So a couple of points that are critical here. My understanding is that the funding is to enable us to restore free instrumental instruction, which, I've certainly been around here long enough to remember when we did have. It's not so terribly long ago. It was always an option open to us, in fairness, and it was an option that was certainly taken in the past. That is not quite the same as the figures here for the cost of delivering a sustainable service, for addressing what I take to be the gap in provision based on the figures that are outlined in the waiting list. I think that what would be very helpful from my perspective is to understand to what extent that, it's not actually a set of recommendations, but to what extent the recruitment, for example, of the 5 additional instrumental tutors, does that give us a service that is, or has a greater likelihood of remaining sustainable for, the medium term would be nice, although recognising that planning ahead is remarkably difficult at the moment in many respects. Because certainly I think that's, we're not really necessarily in that position at the moment. And quite clearly, I think everyone is at least agreed that that's a position we need to get to. That's always going to incur a cost for this authority because, to the best of my knowledge, the funds that we accrued from charging for instrumental instruction didn't meet the full cost of the service anyway. And I'm not clear that we would ever. I'm not clear we ever were in that situation. At one point, as I say, not so very long ago, we certainly were not. We were bearing the full cost of it, and we weren't charging parents anything at all. And then that was changed somewhat. We charged proportionately some more parents or families than we previously had done. But it certainly wasn't full cost recovery of the service. It wasn't anywhere near it. So I do think that we will always have an additional budget consideration here. In as much as either, I think, ensure we're happy to stick with what we've got, or to incur some or all of the projected additional costs that have been outlined in this paper. Now, I don't think we're going to get full reimbursement of that because, actually, why on earth would that be the case? It's not actually the case now on the basis of the sums that we were until recently charging parents. We have always borne a portion of the cost of this service ourselves. The extent of that has varied over time, relevant to our budget decisions. So the bit that for me I think is absolutely critical, and I do certainly take on board that having more certainty in terms of distribution would be awfully handy. What I am at least as interested in is whether, for example, were we to go to taking on another 5 instrumental tutors, would that get us to the point where we have, I guess, a sustainable, stable service that provides a reasonable degree of equity of provision across the region? Because I think that's the first point that we require to establish. If that gets us on the right track, then I think we need to look seriously at how that is funded, and we certainly do need to get the clarity everyone has referred to in terms of the distribution in the future. £12 million, I think that has been raised, or that has been referenced. But I think we need to be very clear that just as we never got the full cost from the people that we charged for this service in the past, neither are we going to get it from anywhere else. And there will therefore always be, I think, a requirement for us to put our hand in the collective resource pocket if that's something that we believe to be a priority. I certainly think that it is, and I hope others will agree. But I think that potentially is the sort of information that would be helpful for us to see in March, because if there is in fact a requirement for us to do more, or if there's another way of doing it that doesn't necessarily incur such expense, then that too I think we need to look at. And I suppose that's kind of what I was hoping we were going to get in terms of an overall strategy. But I do recognise that that this report has brought back the immediate things that were requested. I think, though, that I am as interested in the long-term sustainability of the service, recognising that it has been under quite a lot of pressure and variable circumstances over the past decade, really. So I do think, Chairman, that sort of further information might be helpful in helping us make good decisions on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I've got John Young indicating he wants to speak, so I'll call John in first, and then I'll come back to you, Jim, to comment on the what's been mentioned today. So, John.
Thanks, Chair, and I would like to thank my fellow councillors for their contributions to this debate, and a lot of what I was going to say has been said by Councillor Davidson. It is strange how music is seen differently from other subjects in schools. We'd never have this discussion about maths, for instance. Pupils are as entitled to a proper, sustainable musical education as they are to an education in chemistry. And really, I support Councillor Surtees. We should really have a strategy paper showing clearly what type of music provision, a sustainable, equitable, across the whole region provision could be delivered in the future, because this particular subject has been discussed for virtually every year of the several years I've been a councillor, and we're no nearer a solution now than we were in 2017. So could I support Councillor Surtees' request and Councillor Davidson's request for a strategy paper outlining provisions which will meet the needs of our pupils here in Dumfries and Galloway in a sustainable, ongoing basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for your points and questions. And to start at the beginning, I very much welcome your comments, Councillor Scobie, which absolutely reiterate what the consultation document found. And Councillor McCammon, again, your idea of the moral obligation to do this. I think other comments were around, from Councillors Surtees, Davidson and Young there, were around what information do we actually need. Now, based on our current charging policy, what the Chair states is accurate, that we would notionally, if that 12 million were divided in the pro rata basis that we understand, that would cover the shortfall against the additional. It wouldn't necessarily cover anything on the existing 800 plus youngsters who are already in the system. Equally, we must recognise that the waiting list, which now is 400 plus youngsters, that wasn't anything like that number before. So numbers on the waiting list have increased following the 100-day commitment by government. So the fact of a free service has increased. Well, I'm not saying causation, but the fact of free service was followed by an increase in a desire to have this service very significantly. So what that means, and I think that's what Councillor Davidson, perhaps you talked about, a stabilised service, and that's the key point, isn't it? That it was fairly stable in terms of numbers until we got the information around the 100-day commitments, at which point there was a very significant increase in the waiting lists. And as has been mentioned by Councillor Young there, since we, even if we have full-time staff teaching as many youngsters as they can, there will still be a shortfall given our current charging level. So whatever we do, and that point has been made, we will always incur a shortfall on the current charging levels. And so because we don't have a stable understanding of what the demand will be given a subsequent government statement, and we don't have that government statement in terms of the allocation, we can't make the decision, or at least you have the information I have currently. And when I have more information, I'll provide you with the additional information. But currently, that's where we are. In terms of the final comment there around curricular provision, this is in addition to the curricular provision. So this music is already existing in all of our secondary schools. It is a curriculum subject that all young people follow, and then it becomes something in the senior phase, or usually S3 and above, that youngsters select for their own timetable. So that's already in place, and we deliver that and get very, very strong results. What we need to do is to consider the extracurricular, and I think, Councillor Young, your point is actually well taken, but we need to recognise that what we're talking here is that there is an extracurricular point about the IMS. So yeah, are there anyone want to come back on any of the points I've made?
I've got Elaine wanting to come back in. Elaine?
Jim's just covered quite a lot of what I was going to say, because I think we're getting confused here between music in the curriculum of the school, available to all pupils, however talented or otherwise, and like all other parts of creative education, extremely important to development in all manner of ways. And Councillor Scobie made reference to RAPLA. My understanding is RAPLA was available to all children who were interested in it. It wasn't about people who were particularly talented or anything else. Any kid who wanted to make music could. And I think that there's a difference between that. And I think to say that, oh, you wouldn't be expected to do this for chemistry. Well, it's not really any different in terms of the curriculum in the school. Music tuition is available in the school to all pupils who want to study it, as far as I understand it, without any charge. We don't charge for curricular music. This is for people who want something a bit more than that, and that may well be because the child has particular talent, and not every family who has a child with talent is able to afford to send them privately. But it's not that music is being treated differently, because if, for example, a child has a particular talent in maths, chemistry, or whatever, and parents choose to bring in a tutor on top of what happens in the school in order to bring them on further, they would still have to pay for that. It wouldn't be being paid for by the education department. So I think we really have to be careful about not being confused between music education in school for all pupils of all abilities and the music tuition, additional music tuition provided by tutors out with the curriculum, in order to bring on the talents of particularly talented pupils or whatever. So don't let's get confused about that and say that we don't, we have rubbish education, music education in schools, because I don't think that's true. I think we do have good education in music in schools, and we mustn't get these two issues confused. Just wanted to say that, Jim, you did already cover quite a lot of that in your answer to the questions.
Can I ask a wee point before we get any further? There's been reference made to a meeting in March. I've just been checking my diary. There's no meeting for education set for March.
Yeah, I checked mine. It's in the main diary, but it's not actually within our individual diaries. It's the 24th of March.
24th, right, yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So,
Willie?
Would I be able to come?
Just a moment, Jim. Willie Scobie wants to come in.
Firstly, just to correct myself, I've been corrected anyway. They're Uploch, not in Perth, it's in Stirling. So I apologise for that. And I think Elaine picks up on the point that I'm making. It's not about, Systema wasn't about teaching youngsters to play music per se. The benefit of it was that they could then, and some of them went on to actually read it, and many, if not them all, went on to read music. It was the social benefits that they gained from that. So it wasn't just that, someone was talented in music, so we'll give them as much musical tuition, I think, as was necessary. Bernadetti, I can't remember her first name, she actually took the kids to London to play in an orchestra, the National Orchestra. That was the side benefits. It was about giving the kids that social interaction and the training around that, and their education through the curricula did improve. And that's what I was referring to. Elaine has picked up on that eloquently.
Jim?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Scobie. That's right. I remember the Raploch is under Stirling Castle, isn't it? Nicola Benedetti, and yeah, absolutely right. Phenomenal piece of work there. And I think just to follow up on what Councillor Murray said, which I think is picked Scobie there in his comments, which are about that this is beyond out with the normal curricular provision. This is an additionality. That is not to say in any way it's not phenomenal, and as everyone has said, we're singing its praises. However, there is strong curricular provision currently in place, and this decision is not about that. It is about the additional instrumental music service. Many thanks.
Thanks, Jim. So I think we've got two issues here. One is the budgetary aspect, and the other one is provision of the service. I certainly think we could get a further paper coming to the March Committee on provision of the service as to actually how we roll this out and what the best way of providing this is. In terms of the budgetary aspect, obviously we need to be setting our budgets in February. So I think what we actually need is some sort of budget template in terms of expanding the service to incorporate these up to 5 additional music tutors. In terms of the 100-day commitment from the government, I'm quite happy to write to the government asking for clarification on this, but I'm sure every convener, chair of the 32 local authorities will be in exactly the same position, because when you think about this, it's really weird in terms of funding. If you're a local authority that charges £400 a head, then effectively, or you had been charging £400 a head, then you get far more money given back to you than those local authorities which weren't charging a penny. So, you know, it's very, very, very confusing in terms of that. So, just looking at the... Willie, you want to come in?
No, Chair, if you're happy to write to them, I think we should. And if it comes for the 32 authorities, it may just spur them on that bit further to allocate that 12 million. Then we would know where we were. So that your suggestion there, I would hope the committee takes on board that you do write and put pressure on the Scottish Government. Better if we were lobbying, but that, to see what effect that has in the letter, and then a further paper to come would be ideal to deal with this.
Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to come in, so if we can move to the recommendations. Can we note 2.1, the instrumental music service capacity is described by the data provided as detailed. And 2.2, consider the information relating to the potential for allocating additional funding to facilitate the further evolution and development of the instrumental music service, with a specific focus on meeting the needs of more learners as detailed in 3.7, and maybe it's 2.3 about the budget template. I think what we would be looking for, once again, we don't know how much money we're going to get from the Scottish Government, but we know how much it would cost for the additional 5 tutors is 253,000. So looking to provide up to 253,000, depending upon how much money we get from the government to compensate for that. And 2.4 that I write to probably Kate Forbes, I should think, asking for clarification on the allocation of funding to Dumfries and Galloway Council. Everybody happy with that, Stephen?
Yes, I think the only comment I would make, and it's maybe on the back of Councillor Murray's intervention earlier, just about maybe it being articulated in the report, that difference between curricular music and instrumental instruction, because obviously if there is whatever additional funding or budgeted funding we provide for that service, if that's to cover the cost of delivering a free service over and above, then I think we need to be very clear that that's what we're actually doing, because this to me reads like effectively there's a few hundred kids that have effectively been excluded from a free service because they weren't originally able to pay for the service. You could read it like that. So I think having that clarity within the report that comes to the Marks Committee would be very helpful for members who aren't as aware of the subject.
Okay, so I think we can incorporate that into the March, the differentiation between curricular and extracurricular provision of the service, then have a report coming to the March Committee, by which time we might have more clarification on the funding situation anyway, in terms of delivery of the service. Okay, everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jim. Okay, item 9. Education and Learning Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2021-22 for the period ending 31st of December 21. It's on page 41. The report provides members an overview of the key budget monitoring issues and the projected performance against budget for the current financial year for education and learning services. Based on the position as at the end of December 2021, excluding the additional costs in relation to the education and learning restart and the COVID-19 response, it is projected that the service will return a break-even position, which is very positive given where we are within the financial year. So we have Colin Pentland to answer any questions on this. Colin, is there anything you want to add to the report?
No, Chair, nothing to add. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Colin. Members, and I see we've got Julie Irvine, wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. It was really a question about 3.10. because we had additional funding allocated to support the Scottish Government's 100 Days commitment for increasing teacher numbers and classroom assistants. And I'm just wondering what allocation has been made, how many teachers and classroom assistants have actually been employed using that funding.
Regards to the sorry, folks, I think I'm getting an echo here. Sorry, apologies. I'll start again. With regards to the funding, the management team are in the process of recruiting to posts. I'm not sure if somebody would be able to provide the exact dates of where the processes are at, but I can confirm at this moment in time, 16 full-time teachers are in posts that have been recruited this month, and there are posts in the process of getting recruited to through HR processes just now. And the balance of the non-teaching side for the learning assistants, they are in the process of getting recruited to as well, looking at the current costs and the staff and establishment arrangements we had to put in place due to meet the needs of the children within those sectors.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, Julie. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back in there? Can I ask, quite often, it's round about this time, I start to get lots and lots of inquiries from probationer teachers, and I'm wondering if any of these posts are going to be permanent posts that will be available to them as they finish their probation time.
Julie?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure Colin or John would want to come in on that question. It's the beginning of the staffing exercise, and I know John's in regular contact with the probationer, so he may wish to give some detail on that. With your agreement, Chair?
John?
Thank you. Sorry, we're getting a bit of an echo as well. Okay. Hopefully that's clearer, folks. Apologies for that. Excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. The funding that's coming down is permanent funding. It's for an additional 28 at this current time, equivalent of NFT of 28 teaching staff. Currently, we've employed, as Colin's indicated, 16 FTE, and we're recruiting to some temporary positions as well at this current time to ensure that we have got the flexibility in our workforce. With an eye on potential changes to contractual situations. We know that there is another 100-day commitment from the Scottish Government as part of the reduction in class teachers' contact time, and so therefore we need to be able to utilise the staffing workforce that will be built up to allow for that to be delivered at a local authority level like Dumfries and Galloway. So we are working with numerous factors to try and ensure we're providing as many opportunities for our staff to achieve employment through our current times, in particular with our continued COVID absence of staff. We need to be really careful and manage this process very carefully, because a fine ecosystem, and if we suddenly move staff into permanent positions in one particular location, it does leave potentially some vulnerability in other positions. So it is very much carefully worked through, and we'll be including that as part of that delivery of the 28, and then with the potential future increase in teacher numbers in terms of those above our normal ratio, to ensure that we've got that opportunity to provide that employment opportunity for our newer teachers into Dumfries and Galloway.
Thanks, John. I've got Councillors Scobie and Young to speak. Willie?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm looking at 3.6 and welcoming 3.6, particularly the bit where it says enhanced support for learners and several other requirements. And I've asked in this chamber again at the Education Committee in terms of was Gillian as Director and Jim as Head of Services that every kid had a proper CP, IEP and all the documents went with it. I am working closely with the Acting Head who is dealing with this issue in Snorri Academy, and I would imagine it may reflect in other schools throughout, so it's a holistic rather than an individual school issue. but I'm dealing with the one in Stranraer just now. My question is, do we think that the 441 as additional cost for learning support with the kids given lockdown and kids who are already in the system pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, is that going to be anything near enough to deal with this so that, you know, we are not failing kids in any way, or an accusation made that could say that we are failing kids who require some very profound one-to-one, if not one-to-two, or two-to-one rather. It's whether that's going to be anywhere near enough to take us from March, or rather beginning of April up to July time.
Director.
Thank you. And Councillor Scobie, I know you've asked that question similarly, and you're very good at keeping our focus on that particular matter as to whether or not that is sufficient budget. We know it's not all about money, and we've also had that conversation that it's about what you do with it rather than the quantum of it. Yes, the needs in schools are considerable and are increasing, not just in Dumfries and Galloway, but in across Scotland, that the needs of young people, and COVID has brought its own challenges. So we are reviewing all the needs of children, in particular schools, on your request, and that forms part of the strategic work that Jim's already referred to, giving a look all across Dumfries and Galloway as to the framework of support and the allocation of additional support for learning staff. So it's a difficult question to ask, is it whether it's enough. It is the budget that we have, and that we make best use of that budget and use the most targeted interventions to support the children that are in front of us.
Willie?
Yeah, I don't think it's a difficult question to ask. It may be a difficult question to answer. But nevertheless, we've got these kids are out there. We need to be focused on it, and appreciate the reply, the response I've got from Gillian as the director. But we need to keep our eye on it. You may say it's not about money, but money is a big contributory factor in that we have the proper resources in our schools to deliver the additional support that's needed. Yes, we can do it in all sorts of different ways, but we still need the resources in there, and it's that focus I would hope we have got an attention on. Working with Jim, I'm sure it is.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair. And just a point to raise, as you mentioned, it's not all about money, it's also about people. I had a very successful meeting this morning with primary heads and again with secondary heads tomorrow around making sure we've got the people, because the schools may well have the budget, but there's not necessarily the people to fill those posts. So as part of the workforce pressures across Dumfries and Galloway, we have already worked with our HR colleagues to do this fast-track recruitment. I understand we had 15 posts recruited to the casual learning support pool to make sure that individual schools have got supply staff where and when they need them, and that work is really important to continue to make sure we've got a bank of well-trained, committed staff that we can call on either to do additional hours or indeed to fill gaps in the service.
Okay, so I've got John Young looking to speak. John?
Thank you, Chair. Page 42, 3.9. Unallocated contingency fund of almost £500,000 to be decided on staffing initiatives. Could I ask who actually decides how that money is spent? Is it education officers or is it elected members? And I'm not being silly here, but could some of that money be used to pay the 250,000 salaries of 5 instrumentalist tutors? So basically I'm asking, if this money remains unused, who makes the decision and how it is allocated? Thanks, Chair.
I would guess it's officers who make the decision, but also this is just a one-off sum of money, so you can't really employ long-term staff on a one-off surplus, if you like. But Gillian?
Thank you, Chair, and for the question. We took the COVID recoveries monies to the management team and we looked at the staff, the best use of this funding in order to meet the needs of the service. In the main, we are not yet we're not yet clear as to the overall cost related to absence. So there's a little bit of buffer there. I know it seems like quite a lot of money. You know, £492,000 is a significant amount of money, but the running budget for the service is 148 million. So it's a relatively small amount of money should absence levels peak. So it is there for us to respond should we have high levels of absence, or indeed if there are unforeseen issues over the course of the academic year, and that would come to the senior management team and through myself in terms of the best way to allocate that spend. Thanks.
Okay, John.
That's fine. So that remains unallocated. It will just go into your overall budget.
The director's note. Okay, so I've got Jim McComb. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Going back to the 1.418 million, did I hear John correctly when he said 16 additional teachers have been employed? Was that the correct figure, John?
That's correct, Councillor McComb. There's 16 so far that have been appointed, yeah.
How many learning assistants have been taken on in addition to that?
So that's information I actually don't have at this particular time, I'm afraid. My side of the business, if you like, focuses more on the teaching side of the business. I do know that there has been significant recruitment, as the director said, so part of the challenge is ensuring we've got the quantity of staff to be able to take on those roles. And that's one of the areas of work that we're trying to progress at the moment, to make sure we've got that continued supply of staff coming into the system. But I don't actually have the numbers of that one, I'm afraid.
Have any additional learning assistants been employed to date? Do you know that, John?
My understanding is that there have been, but as I said before, I don't have the detail on that at the moment, I'm afraid. We can certainly find that out and report that back to yourself, if that's appropriate. Thank you.
Yep, that would be ideal.
I think if that information went to all members of the committee, it'd be useful. Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John.
Okay, so I don't think I've got anyone else. So if we move to the recommendations, can we note 2.1 and note 2.2, the progress against the delivery of the agreed policy development allocations? Okay. So I've got no further business, urgent business. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you in March. Thank you. Right, bye.